Welcome to the deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at how our personalities impact our work lives. And
Oh, this is gonna be good.
yeah, you sent in a really fascinating paper called The Contributions of Personality to Organizational Behavior and Psychology by Judge and colleagues from way back in
That's
2008.
classic.
It's packed with research, so get ready for some aha moments as we try to break this down into insights that relate directly to you and your experiences in the workplace.
I am so excited to dig into this one. It's incredible how much this paper covers. It actually connects personality traits
Yeah.
with 10 key areas of organizational behavior.
Oh, wow.
Everything from job performance
Hmm.
to leadership and teamwork. It really dives deep into how who you are impacts your work life.
Okay, so to start, let's talk about personality traits. This paper uses the Big Five framework: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Famous five.
Can you give us a quick refresher on what those actually mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think of these traits like broad strokes that kind of paint a picture of how you interact with the world. For instance, someone high in openness loves exploring new ideas and experiences, while someone high in conscientiousness is all about being organized and dependable.
Okay, yeah.
And then there's neuroticism, that tendency to worry or feel anxious. The paper digs into how each of these traits can play out in your work life, sometimes in surprising ways.
That's where it gets really interesting, though. The paper also talks about core self-evaluations, or CSE.
Yes, CSE.
It's like an overall self-confidence score,
Yeah.
and it seems to influence how your Big Five traits actually show up at work.
That's a key takeaway.
Yeah.
A high CSE can act as a buffer against the downsides of certain traits. Let's say you're naturally prone to stress because you're high in neuroticism.
Okay.
If you also have a strong CSE, that underlying belief in yourself, you're more likely to push through those anxieties and stay motivated. It's like having an inner voice that says, you've got this, even when things get tough.
So it's like CSE gives you an extra layer of resilience at work. Now let's get into how these personality factors actually play out in specific areas of our work lives, starting with job performance.
As you might guess, conscientiousness is the MVP here. People who are organized, responsible, and hardworking tend to excel in almost any job.
That makes sense. But the paper says there can actually be two MOCH conscientiousness. Is that even possible?
It is. Imagine working at a fast-paced startup where adaptability is key. If you're so focused on meticulously following every rule and procedure, you might actually slow down the team and stifle creativity. In those kinds of environments, a bit more flexibility and openness can be a real advantage.
So the ideal level of conscientiousness depends on the type of job. Now let's talk about motivation. How does our personality affect our drive to get things done?
Well, this is where neuroticism comes in. A tendency towards anxiety and worry can definitely make it harder to stay motivated, especially when faced with setbacks or challenges.
So if you're feeling anxious, does that mean you're doomed to be unmotivated?
Not necessarily. Remember CSE. If you have a high CSE, that strong sense of self-worth can help you overcome those anxious tendencies and stay focused on your goals. It's like having an inner voice that says, you've got this, even when things get tough.
That's a good reminder that our personalities are complex and different traits interact with each other. Now, I've always wondered if you need to be super extroverted to be a good leader. What does the research say?
It's a common misconception that all great leaders are outgoing and charismatic. While extroversion can certainly be helpful, for certain leadership styles, it's not the only ingredient for success. Conscientiousness, being dependable and organized, and openness to new ideas are also crucial, along with emotional stability.
So it sounds like a good leader needs to be reliable, open-minded, and able to stay calm under pressure. But what about stress? Do some people just stress out more than others, no matter what's going on at work?
Absolutely. The research clearly shows a link between neuroticism and higher levels of perceived stress. Those who are more prone to worry and anxiety tend to experience work as more stressful, even if their workload is similar to someone who's more laid back.
No surprises there, I guess.
Right.
But I'm curious about teamwork. Does personality impact how well teams function? I mean, we've all had those teams where things just click, and others where, well, not so much.
You bet personality plays a role. Here's a fascinating finding from the study. Just one disagreeable person on a team can drag down everyone's performance.
Really?
It's like a negativity domino effect. On the other hand, teams with similar levels of openness tend to work really well together, probably because they're all on the same page
Mm.
when it comes to trying new things and bouncing ideas around.
So assembling a team isn't just about skills and experience. It's about finding the right mix of
Yeah.
personalities, too. Wow. Okay, what about those colleagues who always seem to be stirring up drama? Any personality red flags there?
Actually, yes, the paper calls this counterproductive work behavior. Things like gossiping, slacking off, or even sabotaging projects.
Oh, yikes.
Turns out those behaviors are less common
Mm-hmm.
in people who are agreeable and conscientious. They tend to be team players who are focused on getting the job done, not causing chaos.
So if you're looking to create a drama-free, productive work environment, you might want to prioritize those traits when building your team. We've talked about job performance, motivation, leadership, stress, and even teamwork, but we haven't touched on accidents in the workplace. Is there a connection there?
This might surprise you, but yes. The research suggests that people who are highly open to new experiences, those curious, adventurous types, might actually have been more prone to accidents.
Hmm.
It seems their willingness to try new things
Mm.
and push boundaries can sometimes lead to oversights or risky behavior. Low agreeableness can also be a red flag. If you're not inclined to follow rules or cooperate, you might be more likely to take shortcuts or disregard safety procedures.
So maybe a little dose of caution is a good thing, even for those who love to explore new horizons. Now, the paper also covers job satisfaction and conflict resolution, but we'll save those fascinating topics for another deep dive. Instead, let's tackle something a bit controversial.
Uh-oh. Ah, yes, the never-ending debate about personality tests. Some people think they're completely useless, while others swear by them.
So let's unpack the arguments and see what the research actually says. One of the biggest criticisms is that personality tests don't actually predict much in the real world. But when you zoom out and look at the big picture, personality does matter significantly. Plus, if you tailor the test to a specific job, its predictive power goes up even more. It's like using the right tool for the right job.
Makes sense.
But what about people faking their answers? Can't you just tell the test what you think it wants to hear?
That's a valid point. And the paper acknowledges that faking is a possibility. The question is, how often does it really happen, and can we prevent it?
I'm definitely curious to learn more about that.
Well, researchers are developing clever ways to make faking more difficult. For instance, some tests use a forced choice format, where you have to choose between two
Yep.
equally desirable options that measure different traits. It's a lot harder to game the system when you can't just pick all the good answers.
Pick a personality puzzle. I like it. But even if we could completely eliminate faking, is there a point to using personality tests in the first place? I mean, do they actually tell us something meaningful about people?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? While there are definitely criticisms and limitations, the research suggests that personality tests can offer valuable insights, especially when used appropriately and ethically.
So it's not a black and white issue. There are nuances to consider.
Exactly. Now, this paper doesn't just focus on what we already know about personality and work. It also looks ahead to the future of the field and some of the big questions researchers are grappling with.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's on the research horizon? What are the big mysteries yet to be solved?
One question is whether we need to go beyond the big five. Are there other traits, especially those on the dark side of personality, that might be useful to understand?
Dark side traits. That sounds kind of ominous.
Think about traits like narcissism or Machiavellianism, the tendency to be manipulative or deceitful. Understanding these darker tendencies could help us predict and maybe even prevent things like workplace conflict or unethical behavior.
So it's like having a personality radar to spot potential problems before they erupt. What other mysteries are personality researchers trying to unravel?
Here's a fascinating one. Can our jobs actually change our personalities over time?
Wait, you're saying my job could be subtly shaping who I am? That's a bit mind-blowing.
Think about it. If you spend years in a highly competitive, cutthroat work environment, could that experience make you more assertive or even less agreeable over time? Or imagine starting your career in a super collaborative, supportive workplace. Could that environment actually boost your agreeableness and teamwork skills?
I can see how both scenarios could play out. It makes you wonder how much of who we are is shaped by nature versus nurture, our genes versus our experiences. The paper also points out that there's a whole world of personality processes beyond just traits, things like emotions, motivations, and how we interact with our environment.
This is where things get really interesting. By studying these dynamic processes, we can gain a much deeper understanding of how personality actually unfolds in the workplace, how our traits interact with our surroundings and influence our behavior in real time.
It's like we're zooming in from the big picture of traits to see the intricate details of how those traits play out in specific situations.
Precisely. And that's what makes this field so exciting. There's always more to explore and discover.
We've covered a ton of ground today, from the Big Five and CSE to the potential for faking on personality tests and the mind-boggling idea that our jobs might shape who we are. What stands out to you from all of this?
For me, it's that last point, the idea that our personalities aren't fixed, they can evolve over time. It's empowering to think that we have some agency in shaping who we become, even if our environments play a role too.
I agree. It's not about trying to fit ourselves into a predetermined personality box, but understanding our unique strengths and using them strategically in different situations.
Well said. This deep dive has given us a lot to ponder. What are your biggest takeaways so far? Were there any findings that surprised you or made you think differently about your own experiences at work?
I think what surprised me most was the idea that even good traits can have downsides. I mean, we usually think of conscientiousness as a positive quality, but you pointed out that it can actually be a disadvantage in certain roles if it makes someone too rigid or rule-bound.
That's a great example of how context matters. The ideal level of any trait depends on the specific job and work environment. It's not about labeling traits as inherently good or bad, but understanding how they can play out in different situations.
So it's not about striving for some idealized personality profile, but about knowing your strengths and weaknesses and using them to your advantage.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important point from the paper. True success in the workplace isn't just about possessing certain traits. It's about understanding how to flexibly apply those traits throughout your career journey.
So it's more about adaptability than having some magical combination of personality traits.
I think so. It's about knowing when to dial up certain traits and when to pull back, depending on what the situation calls for.
This makes me think about leadership. We talked about how extroversion isn't the be-all and end-all of leadership, but there are probably times when it's helpful to be more outgoing and assertive, right?
Absolutely. Imagine you're trying to rally a team around a new initiative or inspire people to take action. A bit of extroversion can go a long way in those situations.
So it's not about trying to be someone you're not, but understanding your own personality toolkit and using the right tools at the right time.
That's a great way to put it. And that's a key takeaway from this entire deep dive. Self-awareness is crucial. The more you understand your own personality, the better equipped you'll be to navigate your career and thrive in any work environment.
I completely agree. This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It really feels like we've uncovered a gold mine of insights about personality and work today. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, do you think personality tests have a place in the workplace, or are they just a bunch of hooey?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There are definitely valid criticisms, and they shouldn't be the only tool used for decision-making, but when used thoughtfully and ethically, personality assessments can provide valuable insights. They can help people understand their strengths, identify areas for growth, and even build more effective teams.
So they can be helpful, but it sounds like it's all about using them the right way, in the right context.
Exactly. And that brings us back to a key takeaway from this entire deep dive. Self-awareness is essential. The more you understand your own personality, including its nuances and potential blind spots, the better equipped you'll be to navigate the complexities of work and find roles where you can truly thrive.
I love that. It's not about trying to fit yourself into some predetermined personality mold, but about leveraging your unique strengths and being adaptable to different situations. And maybe that's the most valuable insight of all from this deep dive success at work and in life. Isn't about being a certain type of person. It's about understanding who you are and using that knowledge to create a fulfilling and meaningful career path.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been such a fascinating exploration. Thank you for guiding us through this complex research and helping us understand what it all means for us in our own work lives.
It's been my pleasure.
And for those of you listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked some new insights and maybe even inspired you to reflect on your own personality and how it shapes your experiences at work. Remember, self-awareness is a journey, not a destination. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.